Horror has a distinct sound. Visually, it may look like any other genre of film, but horror is something you can hear. From the abstract composition, the bizarre ramblings of a lunatic, to the heightened sense of atmosphere that threatens to give way to an unspeakable evil, horror communicates in a visceral manner. In a theater, you can sense the dread among others. When watching it alone, you become the focus of its gripping power. The best horror films all strike with the same methodology and tactics because they work. The theme of any worthwhile horror film is the same: the promise of violence within unknown circumstances. Unlike the thriller genre, which gives the villain a motive, horror does not grant the protagonist the reasoning of its antagonist or its background. It takes the world we think we know and then destroys it. Successful horror films all practice narrative and thematic rules that contribute to the best scares known to cinema, starting with introducing the audience into known territory. Horror works best when it starts off grounded and familiar, giving your audience an anchored beginning before setting off into unfamiliar waters. This allows them to relate with the characters or find similarities with their environments to the films. Halloween uses the mundane suburbs of Haddonfield, Illinois to draw evil close to home. Its main characters are high school students, babysitters, lovers, overall sympathetic personalities. When the location is foreign to audiences, such as the Antarctic research base in The Thing, characters are given extra attention with their personalities, desires, and fears. The abnormality of the setting does not grant abnormal protagonists.
No problem. Forget it, Palmer. Hey, thanks for thinking about it, though.
The interstellar towing ship in Alien is not populated by over-enlightened minds of 22nd century knowledge, but truckers on a long-haul towing job. People who want a good meal, a nice paycheck, and a safe trip home. Although having everything shrouded in uncertainty may seem to benefit the horror genre, an audience will not be invested in a protagonist it cannot relate to. Having this strong foundation allows the unknown entity to both corrupt a world which we think we understand and take center stage. The unknown entity of your film should not strike out of nowhere, but be introduced over time. An audience should be rewarded for practicing vigilance when characters remain ignorant or fatally brave. For example, The Exorcist gives its first supernatural occurrence 6.5 minutes into the film before Regan is possessed 53 minutes in, giving ample time for the demonic presence to seep into the film's known world. Providing your audience reasons to watch out for the rising presence of the unknown will contribute to their level of fear, as an engaged, intense audience will scare themselves better than the film will. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre gives its college students various warnings of the carnage to come before Leatherface brings his hammer down on the first victim. We see this within the bizarre townsfolk, the astrological readings of the week, even neatly arranged carcasses foretell the detaching reality that the 5 adults let slip out of their grasp. These warnings do not need to be logical or fluently spoken for, as it is signs of the loss of the known world to come. Once the unknown has made itself present and imposing as a threat to the protagonists, their world, which they thought they knew, should begin to turn against them. In this state, the setting should be a vehicle for the villain. The snowy Antarctic tundras do not impose any harm for the Thing, but isolate the research crew from the rest of humanity. The villain is not at odds with its surroundings, it benefits from them. The festive suburbs of Haddonfield ignores the cries for help on Halloween night, for it cannot discern what is part of the holiday spirit and what is true terror. Michael Myers blends right into the crowd, up until he strikes. The Nostromo, out in the depths of space, is tormented by the perfect life form, one that doesn't feel or fear, but consumes one astronaut after another. characters who have demonstrated ignorance, arrogance, or corruption are thrown into a world that violently opposes their values. The college students in Texas who ignore the writings on the wall are served firsthand to an irrational, bizarre, and terrible fate. The steadfast mother who seeks understanding in a scientific world will only be able to confront her daughter's demon with an equal measure of spirituality. The boogeyman is real. Lastly, the filmmaker cannot forget that they are still in the world of narrative storytelling. The horror film, although bizarre and grotesque, should follow conventions set by millions of works of fiction before it. The protagonist who starts off unaware and scared should turn resourceful and dependable. A man who works against the better interests of the protagonist should be consistent in his actions. In consequence, to great sacrifice should come a form of success for the protagonist or protagonist by the final minutes of the film. The setting must stay attached to reality at all times, at risk of the story being lost and the director's intentions becoming the main focus of the feature, rather than the film the audience should be scared of. Almost all horror films have trouble with narrative conventions, as they try to break away from the rules that output a satisfying film for a scary film. At best, this only results in fake-outs, where horror films first present a positive outcome for the film, only for the true nature of the ending to be put in question by subtle or blunt anomalies. At worst, a film loses all literal meaning and becomes a feeding frenzy for film scholars to theorize over, leaving general audiences disappointed, bewildered, or bored. Which brings us to an important polar point. What makes horror unsuccessful? Showing the audience too much. The unknown entity in your film should be one that is used with restraint. Only present it when it is preparing for or enacting a form of violence upon something. When this unknown entity is shown performing questionable tasks, errands, or everyday actions, it communicates to the audience that your horror film is quirky at best or clumsy at worst. In the original cut of Alien, the scene of Lambert and Parker's death plays out with a very different end result. While Lambert is gathering coolant for an escape pod, the xenomorph decides to approach Lambert like so. The fearsome alien is no longer a silent, deadly killer, but an inquisitive life form with poor people skills. Another scene to exemplify this point comes from The Shining, where Wendy, fleeing from an axe murderer, stumbles upon a man in a bear costume and the hotel's bartender having an intimate moment in one of the bedrooms. Despite the score's intentions, these figures are committing no violent acts that directly affect the characters. It does not help the horror film. As mentioned before, a horror film, or any film for that matter, should not lose all sense of reality unless it desires to be valued as an art house film. One that disregards the audience's interests and begs for the audience to be interested in it. The third act of the film, Mother, is at great fault for this, as it takes the claustrophobic narrative of a housewife's home being invaded and turns it into a massive, broad allegory for the selfishness and brutality of man. The events that unfold are disturbing and horrible, but they are narratively unwarranted and almost comical to the insane heights of intensity that it exponentially reaches. A horror film can be unpredictable, but it must be conclusive from prior events of the film. The literal plotline must be coherent even when the world has gone mad. A recent issue is that horror films are becoming more accessible. A horror film does not need to respect an audience's desire for comfort. Yet modern horror has found success within comedic and sentimental undertones. The 2017 remake of It has various scenes that serve a coming-of-age film better than the tale of a shape-shifting killer clown. Scenes where children question their sanity and are scarred physically and mentally are co-joined to blood-cleaning montages set to quirky, ironic music such as this. Another film, The Conjuring 2, takes a break from its supernatural force terrorizing a helpless family for a corny Elvis Presley impression / sing-along.
Take my whole life too.
A more recent example, Halloween 2018, features several comedic scenes that preface a character's demise.
Like abracadabra.
I know you talking about smoking weed. Don't lie to me. That's against the rules. I'm telling my mom.
Well, I'm gonna tell your mom about your browser history.
You better not.
These scenes give the audience a moment to breathe and relax, but a horror film should have no sympathy for its viewer. Like the evil forces within the images, the film should be stretching out all the sensations of terror and fear from an audience that it can. This is not a call to belittle the importance of character development, because without those comedic scenes in Halloween 2018, their deaths would be meaningless. This point should be regarded as an intervention to those who produce horror in this manner. That the pursuit to terrify an audience should not be handicapped. To make them crawl back in their seat, to shield their eyes, to fear the dark and the silence and all that is beyond logical comprehension. The mind of a killer, the target of a murderer, the prey to an unstoppable beast.
Dallas?
The known world being ripped from your mind as if it was never truly there to begin with. A world of madness and bloodshed and nightmares that films can provide over and over again, one generation to the next. An inspiration for fear, a true horror film.